Studios. This is WOC Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
All right, 24 minutes before 11 o'clock. You ever go to somebody's house that they have children and you find a children's book just laying around and you pick it up and you start reading it and looking at the pictures and going, oh my gosh, this is good, right?
Yes, exactly.
Sometimes we forget how good a children's book can be. I have one right here that is exactly like that. It is called Undaunted, the wildlife of, and I am going to mess up the name of the lady, Baruti Mary Galdikas, and her fearless quest to save orangutans. What an amazing story. You know, it just really makes you want to be one of those people that does something for the innocent, you know?
Exactly.
Innocent animals, you know, they're just wild and they just want to live their lives, and sometimes we interfere as humans so much. Anita Silvey is on the phone. She wrote this book. She's an historian, a researcher. Looks like she's been working with children's books for a while, and this is out of the park one. Anita Silvey, good morning, Anita. Thank you for being on the show with us today.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for your kind comments about the book. I of course, only did part of it. You know, I tell the story, but it's really National Geographic that's just done such a spectacular job of giving us pictures. I mean, you literally can go through the book and just read the pictures. Just look at the pictures that they tell their own story. So.
Well, am I showing my IQ level if I tell you that's what I did first? I did read it, but I also I looked at the pictures first. I don't know what it says.
Tell me, no. What you just told me is that you read like a child. That is exactly what they do. They go through and they read because you know their visual sense is so much better than their verbal. Their command of reading, and so almost every child that you work with, you realize they go through, they look at the pictures, they get a sense of it, and then they come back and read it. It's actually the right way to read a book, I always say. So you are wise beyond your years, or you are like a child.
And of course, as an adult, first you go, well, as anybody, as a human, you go to the animals. You're looking at the pictures of the orangutans, going, "Oh my gosh, look at those!" And then you pick up on what the story is about. And can you pronounce the lady's name, please?
Her name is Barute Galdikas, but she always says we can call her Dr. Barute, which is what I do. So it makes it a little easier.
So tell the listeners about her, because I never heard of her before, but she's a hero to me.
Oh, she is definitely a heroine, and she was a protege. She studied a bit with Jane Goodall in Gombe with the chimpanzees. She was one of the proteges of Louis Leakey, and he sent her to Borneo to study orangutans. And what attracted me, I mean, first of all, the pictures of orangutans attract me. You know, they have the whites around their eyes, and they're just so, photogenic and fabulous, and each one has an individual personality. But she went to Borneo in November of 1971, and she's still there. So she never left. She's not like one of those scientists who goes out in the field and,
That is really amazing. That is really amazing.
Teaches. Yeah, she stayed out there, and of course now she's so involved in the conservation of the animals in the area. So I just thought she was a great role model for any child who loves animals, is thinking about a career, could they go into conservation? And she really presents kind of an ideal pattern of what a life like that could be.
And it's pretty amazing that her husband wanted that same kind of life.
Well, he did initially, and all those early photographs that we have, he went with her. But at one point, he always thought they'd go back. He always thought they'd go back to Canada, where they were from, or they'd go back to UCLA, where they'd been. And he didn't realize, I mean, she talked about a bit with me. She said, he didn't realize I was going to want to stay there, and that he hadn't intended to go live in the wilderness for his entire life. And so they did have a child, and he took the child back to Canada. And then she remarried a native, a Dayak, member of the Dayak, and they had 2 children in Borneo, and she stayed in Borneo. But yeah, he stayed with her a long time. It was just, they never had the conversation that said, oh, no, this is where we're always going to live, because I think she didn't know that at that time.
Yeah, probably not. Yeah, that makes sense to me. So do the orangutans that we see in the book, are they like domesticated like a dog might be? And I don't even know if I want to put them in that same category. But I guess what I'm trying to ask, are those orangutans friendlier to the humans that they know than the ones that might never have met the people who are there?
Right. Some of the pictures of the animals that we have them because they were captive. Their mothers were killed, and they were brought into the camp for Barute to raise and rehabilitate. And so some of the better pictures that we have are the ones up close. Those are ones who have either gone through the rehabilitation there or they have stayed in the camp. Sometimes you see in the book pictures of the wild orangutans. I mean, they swing in the trees. You know, they move very quickly. It's very hard, actually, to get a good photograph or to get even film of them. So we do have some like that, but some of the ones that like to cook or put things over their head or open packages, you know, we've got little snapshots about who they are. Those are ones who have who came through her rehabilitation program. So for people who go there, those are the one animals that they get to meet.
And I learned from the book that the orangutans, they're not sedentary. Every time they want to take a nap or sleep, they go somewhere new. They don't just stay in the same place. They're not comfortable there.
Yeah, they build a nest every night, and it's a very this is an elaborate, you know, kind of a cushy bathtub kind of thing that they create in the trees. So it takes a good time to reconstruct. They sleep in that nest for one night, and then they keep moving. They keep moving through their territory. So every night they have to create, you know, their own nest. The infants stay with the mothers for 8 years, longer than any other mammal that we know about. You know, know about. And
wow.
part of it is they eat about 240 different plants, so they have to learn the plants they can and cannot eat, and they have to learn to build these nests and various things like that. It's a long time until the mother, at about 8 years, this very patient mother kind of sends them on their way. But the rest of the time, Barut described it as they're sort of like prickly red scarves hanging around your neck. You know, they just hang on to the mothers and are there with them all the time.
The book takes us through her adult life, basically, Barute. We see photos of her. In fact, the cover from 1975 National Geographic, I remember that cover. That one is familiar to me.
Yeah, it's a very familiar one. That was during the time Jane Goodall was working with chimpanzees, Diane Fossey with gorillas, and Barute was working with orangutans. And but no one had studied them. Part of the problem is because they move so fast through the trees, the scientists didn't know much about them. They didn't know about family lives.
Is that right?
They didn't know what they ate. They had they had very few records, and it really took somebody with tremendous perseverance to even get a sighting of them. I think that it was Christmas Day that she first got a sighting of one of them, that they stood still long enough that she could actually get her binocs out and see what they were doing. And she said it was the best Christmas present she'd ever been given. So
this is probably a dopey question, but maybe you can answer it in a different way than what I'm looking for. But have the orangutans ever seen the book?
That's a good question.
It's a dumb one, I know.
No, it's a good one.
I'm just curious how they would react, because they might like to see themselves in a book. I don't know.
They might. I don't know, and I should ask that. I do have. No. I mean, the Orangutan Foundation. You know, and they may show them there. I do know of a story that Diane Fossey told about a gorilla who picked up a National Geographic magazine, and there were pictures of the gorilla, and the gorilla looked at the picture, you know, like pointed at the pictures,
right?
Seemed interested.
Recognized.
So my guess is they might well be able, you know, to identify them. I mean, they're incredibly smart. It is quite amazing. They share about 97% of our DNA, so they have a lot of
probably 100 on my case. You had a story about Mr. Rogers, that there was a gorilla named Coco who actually watched him on TV, and then when he got to meet him, it was almost the same as when you and I meet a celebrity. We're a little bit starstruck. Have you ever seen that scene or whatever?
Yes, absolutely. Coco is one of the Coco was a lowland gorilla and one of the famous ones, and learned an enormous amount of sign language, and was able to communicate and build sentences and do all kinds of things. But yes, I've seen that picture of Mr. Rogers with Coco and realized who he was.
Mr.
So
Rogers.
yeah. Face recognition, sound recognition, I mean, they definitely have those capacities.
When Barute went out there to set up that camp and look for the orangutans, was she attacked at first, or was she a curiosity to them and then they came to trust her, or how did that come about?
Well, they are very peaceful. Sometimes there will be males who might fight, over territory. But in general, they are not hostile. We often think of the great apes as King Kong, but that's not really their personality. No, they fled from her, and that was the problem. The problem was, eventually, she has to wade, because it's a rainforest, so she has to wade through swamp water, and it's really hard when they're moving for her even to get into their territory. Eventually, it was just perseverance, and then, as with all, like all animal scientists, part of what you have to do is you have to habituate yourself to them. They get used to seeing you, and then you can stand and look at them through binoculars for a little longer and a little longer. And she eventually had about 50 hours that she had followed the same orangutans, and that was just such a breakthrough for her, because she was afraid she might actually never get to see them. But they were, from the minute she arrived at Camp Leakey, they started to drop off orangutans who had been captured and were being held in cages.
Oh.
And she convinced the Indonesian government that they should never be in cages, that she would care for them. And so she began to get a whole group. Eventually, the government started to trust her. They would bring the animals in, and then so she had a lot of, she had like 7 or 8 orangutans who were hanging on to her at all times and, staying around her.
That's amazing.
And so she had to be their mother. She became their mother.
Yeah, in the timeline, as recently as last year, the timeline indicates that last year she and her staff planted 200,000 trees. That fact alone makes me wonder if you could talk a little bit about how, in addition to the specific animals she was working with, she actually helped work with the environment around the animals as well.
Oh, yeah, she has to do both because, of course, otherwise they're not going to have the environment. And so she founded the Orangutan Foundation International, and they raise money to do things like repopulate the rainforest. As you said, so many trees, they're out planting trees all the time. She's working with the government to convince those who have palm oil plantations not to cut down the rainforest to do this, to make that sustainable, but not to destroy the environment and the habitat. So a lot of her work has been in just the conservation. One of the things she said to me that was so haunting, she said the thing that drives her is that she thinks of a lone male orangutan coming into an area, because they travel a rather wide area, and making a call and not realizing that he's the last orangutan on Earth.
Oh, my.
And she said, I don't ever want that to happen. And so I have to, every day, I have to save another animal. I have to save the species.
She's on a divine mission, really. I don't know.
She really is, yeah. I found her so spiritual. It was almost like a Zen conversation. She has gone to another place in terms of her life and the life of others.
So the full circle part, I guess, is the fact that we talk about a children's book, and this is, you're never going to get a better children's book than this, but she actually, there was something in here I'm looking for, I can't find it now, but she was with Curious George, actually kind of got her started in having an interest in this.
Yeah, there was the book in there, the book cover.
Curious George was the book she loved as a child, and she was raised in Toronto, Canada, and she would go to the library, and that would be the one that she would check out again and again and again, as people who work with children know. And of course, it's sort of interesting because already she's sort of interested in the species, at least that, in the area that she's going to work in. She always said that. She said, I think I was born to study orangutans. And when she was around 19, she saw a picture of one in a magazine. It was like it just absolutely seized her. That this was an animal that called to her, and she decided she had to study them, and then she had to find a way to do that.
Yeah.
So.
And she's also preserving a home for different kinds of animals that are rare. You had noted the red giant flying squirrel and the Sunda, the clouded leopard, and also a pygmy elephant.
Yeah, well, that area, I mean, one of the reasons to preserve it is it's home to so many great species, and the more, if the rainforest environment goes, then we lose those animals. So, yeah, she's really fighting for all of that life in that area. Orangutans only exist on 2 islands, Sumatra and Borneo in Indonesia. So the preservation of that land
is that right?
so critical. Yeah, the only place they can be found.
We had a story this morning about the key deer, and I think they only exist on one island in the Florida Keys.
Yeah.
And the reason they're in the news is because they had dwindled in numbers down to like a dozen or so back in the 50s, and now they're up to 600, and there's somebody wanting to take them off the endangered list, which means if they are, then they'll be able to build on that island. And I'm thinking, how can they ever think 600 is enough? Mm-hmm. That seems like such a small number.
Well, it is. It's like the mountain gorillas. We now have over 1,000 of them, and they've grown up from the hundreds. Again, it's a good conservation story. It's actually worth. But you're absolutely right. The minute you start to take away from the land and where then we get down to they're endangered again. So,
did you go to Camp Leakey for the interview? And were you?
I interviewed her. She goes to Canada during the rainy season, which was great for me. So I was able to talk to her there. But I did watch a lot of films. There's a great movie, Born to be Wild. If you've never seen it,
I've seen that one.
Yeah,
Morgan Freeman
with the motorcycle. That one.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, but that shows the camp. It shows her. It shows everything that you do. And I talked to people who'd been on the tours. They're small groups. There are 30 to 40 people. It's not it's not a large group, and they come into the camp and they get to see she has that care facility where she's got about 330 orangutans at almost any time, and they're rehabilitating them to send them out into the wild. And so people who come there get to see them play on jungle gyms, and they get to see how they're fed and what happens with them, and they get to be around. They get to be kind of out in the wilderness a bit with those animals.
Can I ask a question about their faces? I think we sometimes apply human understanding of face to animals, because you look at a dolphin, it looks like it's smiling all the time.
Yeah.
And I don't think it is. I think that's just the way it looks. But when I look at an orangutan, look at some of these pictures, I mean, some of them look wise. Some of them look like they're being comical or that they're funny.
Yeah.
Do the faces actually represent what they are feeling, or do we apply that as humans? We think we know something about them by their face.
Well, that's the thing, of course, a scientist has to worry about. You don't want to anthropomorphize your subjects. But certainly, when she talks about their behavior, certainly a lot of their behavior is very comical. They seem to joke around and play around. They love to play.
And they know it's funny, right? They know they're having fun?
They're having fun, yeah. They're really enjoying, and again, they've got these long arms, these 7-foot long arms and big shoulders, and they just love to swing, they just, kind of, that's why you don't want one in your house, they'd be swinging from the timbers, because they just really need that kind of exercise and being outside. I agree. I think part of it is, their eyes are surrounded by a bit of white, so they look a lot like our eyes, and I do think when I look at that male at the beginning of the book, there's a male orangutan, and he just looks, he's so magnificent, and he just looks like, he's seen a lot of the world, and he knows a lot about what goes on.
Is the male-female look like in humans? We obviously look different? Is it the same? Like dogs, you can't tell a male or a female unless you look underneath.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, you really can with the orangutans. The males have big pouches around. They have throat pouches, and it's like they get a cylindrical face. Barute thinks they look a bit like aliens. She said, we don't need to go in outer space. Just look at a male orangutan. So they have very different looks. You can tell them right away from their faces, and mature orangutans, that is.
Does each of the orangutans, do they have their own family or colony, or do they all coexist with each other?
The mothers stay with the babies for 8 years, but otherwise they seem to be, like then in areas they can be with family members, not family members. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not after that early period of time, it's not a cohesive family structure in the way, say, the gorilla would be a cohesive, the gorilla families stay together their entire time. With orangutans, I think because they're traveling and they're in the trees and they go distance, that there were, Barute found a lot of combinations of, they usually don't have two mature males too close to each other in the same area, but otherwise there can be, a lot of different family members.
You know what you will never know? You will never know the child that looks at your book and then grows up to be the next Barute. You know what I mean? This is going to launch somebody,
I think so.
Well,
it's beautiful.
Well, I did a book called Everything I Need to Know I Learned from a Children's Book, and I interviewed people who, about the book they'd loved. And a quarter of the people I interviewed had chosen careers because of the book they read as a child.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
You're right. I will never see that child, but it's certainly my hope with this book that a child picks this up and reads it and thinks, I can go be an animal researcher. I'd love to do that. I'd love to conserve animals. So I do hope I inspire a few of them.
So I found it on Amazon. I want to direct people to where they can buy the book. Is it available on a different website that you want to recommend?
Not one that I would recommend it, on the internet, but also any local bookstore should have it. National Geographic is a good company in terms of getting the books out. So it's easily findable right now.
And as a thank you for listening, if you call me right now and I pick your phone call, the book that we have will be yours. I'll leave it out for you. It's an amazing but small, not small in dimensions.
Beautiful.
You know what I mean? It's like 8.5 by 11, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, it's
nice,
gorgeous. Nice
hardcover, beautiful photographs, and I love the information you get from the book and just the feeling you get from the book. Anita, Silvey, thank you for the work you do and for sharing some of it with us here on the radio.
Oh, thanks so much for focusing on orangutans today.
Yes, I know. I feel like I think I have a 7-foot arm span. I think I do.
You look like you do. Yeah.
I got a big arm span. I'm
hanging it out right now.
We went to the gorilla exhibit at Animal Kingdom, and they had a plaster casting of the big male hand. And everybody was waiting to put their hand up against it, and my hand was bigger than his. And I said, I got a problem here. Thank you, Anita. Thank you for being on the show with us today. That was fun.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be right back.
Career Source Citrus Levy Marion brings together business and community partners, economic development leaders, and educational providers to connect employers with qualified, skilled talent and job seekers with employment and career development opportunities. Tune in the third Wednesday of each month at 9:30 a.m. to Career Source Citrus Levy Marion and learn how they can help you. Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Fox News, I'm Chris Foster. President Trump tweets about the suspect in a standoff in Philadelphia. He never should have been allowed to be on the streets. 6 officers were shot and injured.
2 officers were trapped inside for about 5 hours after the shooting broke out, but were freed by a SWAT team. Mayor Jim Kenney, a Democrat, is calling for stricter gun laws.
Whether it's our 6 officers who were shot or it's some 15, 17, 20-year-old kid on the streets of Philadelphia who gets shot with guns that shouldn't be in people's hands.
The accused shooter surrendered after tear gas was used.
Fox is talking to Jay Powers. There's a new Fox poll on gun control and President Trump.
The poll, conducted after mass shootings in Dayton and El Paso, found an overwhelming majority, 90%, want to see more background checks. 2/3 want assault weapons banned. President Trump's job rating has declined in the aftermath of the shootings, with 59% saying he's tearing the country apart.
Fox's Rachel Sutherland. This is Fox News.
Pros like you expect more out of the brands you use every day. Lowe's gets it. It's why we stock the best brands so you can get the job done right every time. And now we're offering Pro customers a chance to give one of those brands a try for free. Right now, Pros can get up to 10 gallons of Valspar paint absolutely free and experience firsthand how Valspar delivers a smooth application and reliable color for all your touch-up work. Take your next paint job to the next level. Do it right for less. Start with Lowe's. Valid